Hey guys, I haven't done a video in a while, but we were doing this dark gray stuff, and it brought up a subject matter about shooting on location versus shooting or for composites. So I wanted to talk about it, about the differences. For instance, when we shot the dark gray, we were just thinking, oh, well, I'm going to build this big bonfire behind her, and we'll just have this giant wall of fire, and she'll be in the front of it, and we'll just shoot it outside, close to nighttime, and that'll be the whole effect. And then we could post it behind the scenes and say, look, we shot it and set my backyard on fire, and that'll be the whole picture. The problem with this is we probably let it get too dark, so there wasn't any sense of atmosphere behind her where you could really see any background to it except for just flame and then just black. So I did add a little J.J. Abrams lens flare to it, for fun, because when you use anamorphic lenses, you get that blue glare to them. And when he's doing a lot of green screen stuff, the green screen probably doesn't have that. So he's having to add that later in post. And he probably does too often, which is his signature thing. I also added a lightsaber thing to it. Other than that, the problem with shooting on location, which is my whole point of this, is when you're shooting on location, not only are you dealing with the environment, hoping it doesn't rain, it's not too windy, blowing all your equipment around. In a situation like this where we had this big fire, I wanted a big wall of fire. Well, that didn't last long. And if you saw the behind the scenes on that, then you know what happened. As soon as you light it, the fire, it's go back and, trying to focus. I didn't have my video light high enough, so it wasn't focusing. I couldn't, focus like I wanted to, like I do in here. But we're on a time limit, so the fire is just immediately dying down. It went from super high where it was like awesome, and then you never know how bright the fire is going to be. So, or the same thing if you're shooting like a sunrise and it's dark and then the sun appears, you haven't really guessed that. How bright is this sunlight going to get? How much light do I need in front of them to kind of balance that out? And you have to do that all on the spot on a timer before all the light that you want goes away, or in our case, the fire. So, the fire started going. It's kind of big, so it's just like, okay, pose, shoot. Damn, the front light's not bright enough. Damn, I can't focus because I don't have the video light to light you in pitch darkness enough to be for the camera to see you. So the focus is hunting. And it's rushing all this stuff. And then on top of that, going, okay, look over here, so your face is in the light. Let me try to think of the scene, what's going on. And none of this is really prepared or planned because you just didn't know how big the fire was going to be. So after we did that was our location thing. So we could say, there's our behind the scenes. Look, we did it with actual fire. The whole time I'm thinking, man, I should have just shot stock of the fire because I didn't get any stock of it when it was as big as it could, it was. That I could have just added in Photoshop afterwards, as stock. So after we did all that, and it was drag all the equipment back in here, put out the fire, which was my backyard, and then come in here, and then we shot a couple other things. Well, once we get in here, then it's like, okay, well, here's the kind of ideals, or what we'll do, the moods, the colors. So then it's just, okay, get those lights where they match the atmosphere and the environment that we're gonna add to it. Make sure the lighting and the tones and everything match all of that. Focus more on the poses. If we want a fan on, we can turn a fan on to add a little wind to it. We can move the costume around. We can take as much time as we need. Not only that, but she can see herself in a mirror the whole time to know if her hair is not right, if something looks wrong. And we don't get 30 pictures in before she realizes something doesn't look right. So that's one of the best things. The other thing I love about studio stuff is using the flashes and the strobes, you really get super sharp, clear images. Whenever I shoot location, there's always, I don't care how bright it is or whatever, there's always a certain fuzziness to it, a certain lack of focus. A lot of people, you see these pictures where the background's just bokeh, which is just blurred everywhere. And everybody's like, oh, look at that dreamy blur. Well, I guarantee you, if you saw those photos up front, it might be the tip of their nose is in focus and the rest of it isn't. You just see them on Instagram and stuff like that as tiny images, so you don't notice as much. But everybody's like, oh, I love that blur. And that could come in handy. If I'm shooting in a parking lot, I would definitely want some blur to get rid of that parking lot. Here, though, I want everything sharper because the background, I want to be able to see the costume. I want everything to be in focus. So that way when I'm cutting her out of a picture, the edges aren't blurred too much where I can't, properly extract her from the photo. But the composite part takes a lot more work, a lot more thinking. But when you're shooting it, it's a lot easier to plan and get the mood and focus on the pose and get her where she looks the best and the character looks the best they can look and really, has that emotion and pose to it. Then it's just up to like a movie. You get the actors against green screen, get their best acting chops, even though they don't have an environment to work in and their lightsaber doesn't work. It's just, that's the acting part. And modeling is a lot of acting. I'm sure a lot of Sports Illustrated or Victoria's Secret chicks that are in the Caribbean in the winter because the summer issue comes out, but they can't wait till summer to shoot it. So they're freezing to death, but they're trying to look warm. That's acting. So to me, it's just get the best I can, of Danica doing this. And then the rest of it's just on me to push up what she's done and make it really, really kick ass. So I prefer to have that challenge on me than being on location where she can't see how she looks. Costumes falling apart. It might be hot. It might be cold. And we're dealing with timers, with lights. Because the problem is in a studio, when I'm lighting, I'm only lighting her. If I'm outside, how do I light the entire environment around her? I can't. So I have to count on the sun or the clouds or something else to do that for me. And that's just a lot of counting on third-party stuff that I don't like to deal with. Some places we don't have any choice, but, if we have a choice and it's a really cool idea, I'll do it, no problem. If we can make the pictures as cool. But if it's something science fiction or something that we just can't build the set, which hardly half the time we can't, which is the same reason that, movies would. If something's so fantastical, they can't build it or it would cost too much to create it or take too much time, then they'll shoot it green screen. And they do that a lot. So I always see it weird when people are talking about photography, about, it's not a real photograph if you didn't do it all on camera. Well, don't let that fool you because even somebody taking a picture of somebody on a beach or anywhere, did they retouch them? Yes. Then it's not, that was done afterwards. Did they dodge and burn? Yes. Did they adjust the settings and bring up the shadows and drop the highlights? Did they do anything to the photo? Because unless you just take a picture and go done, then everybody's a liar about that. So the fact that I might do the same thing, but my beach might be different than theirs because I added the beach, I don't care. But it's just an example of kind of how shooting location or shooting composite stuff is different. Why I prefer kind of one over the other, depending on the character. In a picture like here, for example, this is just her against the fire. I added the blue flare. I added the lightsaber. Most of it was just bringing up shadows, bringing down highlights to try to balance out the light. But that's it. That's the whole image. So if we had proper sets and stuff, we could do all that. Awesome. I would just take the picture, color correct, fix a couple things, and they're out the door. Instead, ours, most of the time where I'm like, okay, now we did it that way. Now let's do it this way. Well, now all of a sudden here, I have a set because I just added a set. I have the sparks and the fire and the lightning and everything else I want. And it's frozen because I made it frozen and I put it there frozen. I didn't have to count on any third-party stuff to properly be timed and work at the same time and just that one magic moment. No, I created the magic moment. That's a little harder. Some people can do it and some people can't. Some people are trying to do it, but they don't spend the time to do it. So it just comes out looking horrible because they don't think of when you're doing compositing about certain depths of focus, especially movie posters like Aquaman where everything's in focus and that wouldn't be. Even your human eye knows that if you put your hand here, everything else in the background goes focus or goes out of focus. So I can add the lighting effects I wanted. I had the gels on her to do what I wanted. I didn't have hair being blown the wrong way because we were outside and it was windy. I didn't have to deal with anything else. So I am in total control of the picture to ruin it or make it awesome. And that's cool. So it didn't bother me one way or the other, you know, people, when I think you see a photo on Instagram, you just see a photo. The only time that I think you'll actually go, that's bad, is if the photo is not good. Or if you look at something that's been photoshopped, if the Photoshop's not good, it's usually what's bad about it breaks the magic. And then you're like, just like if you were watching a magician and he did the, you know, you saw the card sticking out of his sleeve and you're like, ruined. So I like compositing a lot. Now I wish we had the money to do sets and I could do everything, you know, the way we wanted, but we don't. Now that we're getting into more video stuff, it's the same thing because we tried green screening, but the problem with green screening is it's not as easy as photos because she's like a 3D element, a real life person. You can't just slap a photo behind her that's 2D where the shadows and the glare don't move. Now, if she's just sitting there being still, yeah, the picture could work as a matte painting. They did that in early Star Wars movies as far off mountains and stuff. Yeah, you could do that. The problem is as the camera turns around her, that picture doesn't change. The shadows on it, the highlights. So now you're talking 3D elements, which is a whole other ballgame. And I only have, if I was in the Matrix, I'd learn it. If I was immortal, I'd spend a year learning it. But even if I did know it, the time it would take to do all that stuff, horrible. So with video, we're right back to like with photography, where we're like, damn, we don't have the sets. How do we do it? Whereas photos would be like, well, I'll just do it in Photoshop. Now it's a whole different game. So eventually, hopefully we'll figure out a way to get to that, to be able to do the same cool stuff. And it'll just take doing it and, you know, having it. The only way you get good at stuff is to be horrible at it and see that you're horrible at it and keep doing it until you no longer see all that horrible work in your stuff and it starts to fool even you. So hopefully we'll get there, and that's part of the journey. So anyway, I'm sure this video is way too long, but we were doing this and I just thought, okay, that's a cool subject to kind of bring up. See you guys.